How's it going, everybody? Oxygen here. Looking at the first Doctor in Tegan Jovanka. Um, so this is the deck list. Got the first Doctor here. Reading, when the first Doctor enters the battlefield, search your library and/or graveyard for a card named TARDIS. Reveal it, put it in your hand. Search your library this way, shuffle. If you cast a spell with Cascade, put a +1/+1 counter on target artifact or creature. We got Tegan Jovanka that reads, whenever you attack, target attacking historic creature gets +1/+1 and gains indestructible until end of turn. These two together make a pretty good combo because every time you're casting TARDIS and attacking with it, give it indestructible and +1/+1. So it has flying, has evasion, so it's most likely going to be able to get through on somebody and deal damage. And then whenever it does deal the damage, you get to be able to cast any spell, and it gets Cascade. And whenever it gets that Cascade, you can put a +1/+1 on the TARDIS, and then you just keep looping that until eventually your TARDIS gets really big, and people aren't really going to want to, block. They're going to have to end up killing their good creatures so they can block the TARDIS. But yeah, basically this whole deck is kind of about basically just cascading into copies. So we have Phyrexian Metamorph, and I got Flesh Crafter, which is a new include that I really like. I even put in one of my dragon decks, Miram. And then Maelstrom Colossus is pretty good because it's a really big guy for 8, which is helpful for the Cascade because you can Cascade into better things with 8 mana. And it itself has Cascade, which means you actually get Cascade whenever you cast this thing. So, pretty good. Excalibur, Sword of Eden, that's another really good card. Basically, you don't really want to attach to the TARDIS because the TARDIS, it's a creature whenever it attacks, basically, and then at the end of the turn, it turns back into an artifact, which means that the way the rules work, Excalibur is just going to drop off, and you're not going to really... You have to pay 2 again. Also, I'm pretty sure you can't even equip it to TARDIS in the first place, and I'm thinking about it because it's not even a legendary creature, and Sword of Eden has to be equipped to a legendary creature. Important. Which means basically it's going to be putting it on the first Doctor, Tegan, or any of these creatures that will turn into a copy of a legendary creature. If it enters a legendary creature, you can equip Excalibur to it. Also, like I said before, it's a really good Cascade trigger because it is 12 mana. Aethersworn Sphinx and Ardent Plea are both just in here because they have Cascade. Azurius does not have a lot of Cascade effects. Same thing for Stormcaller's Boon. It doesn't really help except for giving your creatures flying, which I guess is helpful, but it's also 4 mana, which means you're going to Cascade into a 3 cost, which means you're probably going to either Cascade into one of these removal spells or into one of these, what do you call them, ramp spells, which that's not bad, but, if you're already cascading, you've already gotten your ramp at this point, basically, so... Anyway, I'll move on to the removal part of this deck, I guess. We have Austere Command, just solid board wipe. Nothing too wrong with that. Destroy all artifacts, all enchantments, all creatures with mana value 3 or less, all creatures with mana value 4 or greater. It's just really good mass removal. Banished to Our Universe is in here for flavor. It's also in here because it's really easy to be able to cost for just 1 mana. By the time you have both the first Doctor, Tegan, TARDIS, all that stuff out there, not to mention probably an artifact or 2 for ramp, this thing's just going to cost 1 mana because it has affinity for stored permanents, so it'll go down. Farewell is in here. I'll go over what these blue things mean later, but basically this is in here because it's just another really good board wipe. I'm not usually a fan of this because you can basically exile everything and put everyone back at square one outside of lands. And that's not very nice It also makes the games that you play last like an hour and a half longer than they need to last. So I don't really see a point in it usually. But this deck is kind of needs the help honestly, because it can put itself back to where you want it to be faster than another deck would, simply because it revolves around Cascade. Um, anyway, next, Lauren of the Third Path. So, um, I put this in here. It's really good removal because white doesn't have a lot of artifact or enchantment removal, and neither does blue really. Um, but when it does enter, destroy that. But it also draws you cards, which is important in this deck because I tried to put a few pieces of card draw in here. There's a lot of ways to do that in these colors, and even some of our removal and protection, like Arcane Dino, for example, you draw a card. But I think it's just helpful to have another way to draw cards in this deck, and also it's a legendary permanent, which means it's going to um, helps with Tegan, helps with the First Doctor, um, and helps with TARDIS. So anyway, next is Path to Exile, classic removal, really good removal for creatures. Raven form. Kind of a slept on spell in my opinion. You just pay 1 mana, then 2 mana later. Exile artifact or creature, which I know technically you can exile for 1 here, but the fact that you can also target artifacts with this is pretty big. Because again, blue and white don't have a lot of artifact removal, and this is a good way to do it. You're not going to have much to do on your turn ones in this deck anyway, so it's just a good thing to have out there for later. Number 1 is Resculpt. Another artifact or creature. That's why it's in there. Good removal. Snap, good. I think a really good card because it's basically a free removal spell. Can't really argue with that. And swords again. Path swords, same deal basically. So next I'll go to the value of this deck. So I have Unwinding Clock because it is a pretty heavily artifact focused deck, and it's good to have that semi vigilance, and you get to cast more spells on other people's turns, which is always fun. There's not really any flash effects in here though. But it's there in case you need to cast a counter spell or removal spell. It's there. It's there. Eighth Doctor is for recursion. Um, you know, if Taurus does somehow get booted, which it might happen, because it's basically the engine that makes your deck run. You want a way to get it back, and the first Doctor does search your graveyard and library for TARDIS, which means the only way it can get removed is by exile when it's crewed, which it's possible, but it's harder than just a creature. So, but in case you can't, you've cast First Doctor like 3 times this game, it's gonna be hard to get him out. So instead, you put the Eighth Doctor in there, which does all that. Also, it does a lot of other stuff. You may, once during each of your turns, you may play a historic land or cast a historic permanent spell from your graveyard. So it's not just the Taurus, like it's most of the stuff in this deck, because I on purpose put a lot of legendary enchantments, creatures, and artifacts in this deck, so that way you can cast them from the graveyard if you somehow get the Eighth Doctor. And yeah, so that's the Doctor. And then lastly, Cyberman Squadron. There's a chance that other people's decks are not very creature heavy or creature focused, so it's good to have some stuff of your own to copy, which is hence Cyberman Squadron. Really good. Non-legendary artifact creatures you control have Myriad. So this will have Myriad, which is a 5/5 with Myriads. That's pretty good. On top of that, if you somehow have Maelstrom Colossus, that's also pretty good. Aethersworn Sphinx, also pretty good. So, yeah, you have got some options here. Also, I just forgot to mention Mighty Servant of Luco. Really good with Cyberman Squadron. So yeah, next I'll go to the draw. So Brainstorm, Ponder, Preordained, the classics. I was talking about Mighty Servant of Luco just now. It's really good um, in this deck because whenever it does the combat damage to the player, you get to draw 2 cards. It's usually gonna get in there. It's 3 mana. You'll usually be able to crew it the next turn because you'll most likely have both these guys out. And all you do is tap both of them. This guy does combat damage because no one's gonna block a 6/6 with trample on turn 4. That's just not gonna happen. And so you're gonna get to draw 2 cards, and this is a repeatable effect throughout the rest of the game if you can keep them around. So yeah, pretty good. Next, Enduring Curiosity. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. You're going to be doing a lot of combat damage because you have a flying TARDIS that's going to be hitting basically every turn that it's out. So I figured this would be a good thing to put in there. Same sort of reason with Danny Pink because he basically does the same thing, but he cares about Mentor, which you're going to get that on TARDIS because it's a 3/2/4 and this guy's a 4/3. And on top of that, you're going to get it from the first Doctor anyway. When you cast the story spell, I put +1/+1 counter, so that just goes well with that. So Danny Peak, obvious, easy to include in here. Next card, I do want to talk about a little bit because it seems kind of random in this deck. But it's called Aramis Ecor Ancient Shield. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you're going to draw a card, then create a 0/3 white wall creature token with Defender. Now, why are we making tokens in the copy other people's stuff deck? Well, because the second part of this is pretty cool. Beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control with Defender gain Exalted. So, this is interesting. Because Cascade is a cast. So you get the second cast trigger on basically every turn. So you're going to get that 0/3 wall. Then, when you attack with TARDIS, which you're usually only going to be attacking with TARDIS unless you're trying to end the game with your copies of other people's stuff. It'll attack alone, and then out of nowhere, your 2/4 is going to get the +1/+1 from Tegan. So it'll be a 3/5. And it's going to get all the different stuff, so then maybe it'll be like a 5/7, or maybe even a 6/8. And then you're just going to keep pounding people over and over again. And yeah, you're going to end up just doing a lot of damage. So pretty neat. Also, Defender is a really good way, defend yourself. Just good protection as well. So I think that's a good card in here. It could get taken out for something else that's a little bit more efficient for card draw. But, oh well. I like it. I think it's fun. Next thing is Shorkai Genesis Engine. It's kind of on theme because there's a lot of eagles in this deck. But it's a good way to draw cards and get rid of the junk in your hand that you don't need, and again, create blockers or stuff to pilot your TARDIS. If your commander somehow gets removed, these pilots are also a good substitution for that. Next is Second Doctor, again on theme. Beginning of your end step, each player may draw a card. Each opponent who does can't attack you or permanent you control. It's just basically another form of protection and card draw all in one. Pretty good. I like it quite a bit. So yeah, could include. Now, Vinwixt Verbose, I think that's how you say it. Vinwixt. He's a pretty interesting fella because he's from the newer set of Aether Drift. He has a Star Your Engines mechanic. So you have no maximum hand size. So it's a two mana for a 0/4 no maximum hand size. Not great, not bad, but once you start going with your TARDIS, which by turn 5 you should be able to get max speed if you cast everything correctly, hit all your land drops, which you should. Whenever you draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. Now, I think that is absolutely broken because you're going to be drawing 2 cards at the beginning of your upkeep. Or at your draw step, you're going to be drawing 2 cards, which is really good. Then, when you use any of the other 9 ways to draw cards, and there's probably more in this deck just because it is in Azirius, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards with this guy once you get to turn 5. Which I know, turn 5 is kind of a long way away. But this isn't a CDH deck. This isn't a Power 4 deck. It's barely even a Power 3 deck. In fact, if you go to Architect, it'll tell you it's a Power 2 core bracket. It's not meant to be played by pirates. This is a deck to play for fun. So you're gonna hit turn 5 and you're gonna draw a lot of cards, and it's gonna be awesome. And people are gonna be like, "Whoa, why do you have 10 cards in your hand?" It's gonna be great. Next, I'll go to Evasion. Bessie, Doctor's Roadster. This is just a way to help the TARDIS get in if someone else does have flying, or there's some way to get around the TARDIS. It's just basically there for evasion, and you can get out early, so it's nice. Stormcaller's Boon, again, it's a kind of a finisher. You know, you cast this for the Cascade from the TARDIS, but later in the game you can just sacrifice this to just sort of swing out and possibly kill somebody. So honestly, it's good the more I think about it. And being in this deck, it's kind of growing on me. Alright, next we'll go to the lands. So the lands in this deck are going to be your basic, dual lands that you're going to have. Deserted Beach, Flood Farm Burge, Hallowed Fountain, Mystic Gate, Nimbus Maze, all that stuff. But there's a couple utility lands I want to talk about. First is the Trinzalore Clock Tower. It taps for blue, but you put a time counter on it, and then you can pay 2 to tap it to remove 12 time counters and exile it. You're going to shove your graveyard and hand into your library and then draw 7 cards. Activate only if you control a Time Lord. So this is good if you run out of steam, because when you're doing all the things you can do in this deck, because if I scroll down here, the curve is not very high. Like, there's a couple like really expensive things, but most of it's here. You're going to be able to get all that stuff out of your hand pretty quickly, especially with the Cascade. The Cascade's going to be able to help you get that out pretty quickly. So you're not going to have a hand, right? This is helpful to restock that hand. And if anyone removed anything you like maybe an Unwinding Clock or a TARDIS, you can just shuffle it back into your library. It's pretty easy. So yeah, it's pretty good. Next one to talk about is Rogue's Passage. If they have fire, you can still get through with Rogue's Passage. I don't really need to explain this one that much, because Rogue's Passage is just good in any deck that involves a lot of creatures hitting opponents. Next one I want to talk about here is the Ghost Quarter. I think this should be in every commander deck, personally. Mostly because people just sort of sleep on the fact that there's some crazy lands out there that make Commander really hard to play. I should know, I have an Omo deck myself, and no one plays land removal. And so that deck almost always goes off if I get the right amount of mana. So because of that, I now include Ghost Quarters in most of my decks, because you gotta be able to stop people if they're popping off. You just got to. Next one I'll talk about is Gilfrey Council Chamber. This is basically a command tower, but for your Time Lords and stuff. And there's a few in this deck, right? There's 5, including the commanders. And the commanders, you're gonna be cast a guaranteed spell, right? It's commander, so you get guaranteed commander spells, 2 of them. And you're gonna want to. This is just a good thing to have, honestly. It's just helpful. It's basically a command tower. Evolving Wilds, just helping to get color fixing down. I didn't include Tyranny of Expanse as well, because you don't need that much color fixing in this deck. Mostly, there's a pretty good balance in this deck. It is mostly blue, but because it's not like 20% white, 60%, or 20% white, 80% blue, I'm not going to put that much color fixing in here, because you're going to get your cards. And most of these lands in here are dual, so you can get both the colors that you want anyway. And then, of course, Command Tower. You love it. You may hate it. You shouldn't hate it. It's great. It's Command Tower. So, yeah, it's a good thing to have in the deck. Now I'll move on to the protection. So, Arcane Denial. Talked about that a little bit earlier. It's counterspell, helps you draw cards. This is pretty good. I think it's just a really good counterspell. You also don't have to have 2 blue, which sometimes you can get a pinch. You don't have 2 blue, so I think it's good. Final Showdown. This is from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. This is a good conditional board wipe / keeping someone from popping off, or protecting your own thing. Like this card just does so much that it is kind of crazy that it's not used in more decks. It is a $9 card according to Card Kingdom, but it's kind of worth it. I mean, it's literally it's just so good. I love it. I mean, you can make it so someone can't pop off for 2 mana. You can have 2 mana to protect one of your things that someone's targeting, or you can pay 6 mana for a board wipe. Pretty good. And if you want to pay 8 mana, you can do all those things. Because sometimes you just have 8 mana floating around in a artifact themed deck. That just tends to happen. And you can play as an instant speed, so it's not even. It's just good. I love this card. Fantastic card. Lightning Greaves, don't really need to explain that. It's just a really good protection. Null Elemental Blast. I think this is a good card. There's a lot of ways to produce colorless mana in this deck, which is why I included it, but not a ton. So it's enough for me to include it, but when we get into the upgrades later, it's one of the first things I'm going to take out, because if you ever get in that situation where you're like, oh, I tapped white too, oh wait, I can't use white, I need colorless, that's just kind of retarded. So like, I'm not going to include. I'll take it out, but for now it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Next, Perch Protection. It's basically Teferis, but you give somebody an extra turn, which for 6 mana that's not bad. Teferis is 3 and just like way better, but not everybody has $50, $60 to throw around for a 3 mana protection from everything for a turn. Some people just have 70 cents to get Perch Protection, and everything's fine anyway. You also get 4 birds that fly, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, so Perch Protection I think is good. Next, Skelv Defector Might. So one with Toxic 1, and it can't block, which is fine. It doesn't need to block. It's not there to block. It is there for protection. It gives Toxic 1 and Hexproof, which is crazy, because what I find so interesting about this is that you can basically give Toxic 1 to your TARDIS, and you can just kill someone with poison if you get this guy out early, which I think is hilarious. But it's mostly there for the Hexproof from the color. If someone targets it with a removal spell, you're like, oh, actually it's protection from white. Oh, actually it's protection from blue, and he's just not going to die. I think it's great. It's a basically repeatable counterspell. It's pretty great. I love it. Slip Out the Back. I haven't seen this really used a lot in Commander, but it's pretty good. +1/+1 phase out, so it's a 1 mana protection spell that also buffs your creature. I like it. Pretty good. You see Garbrooch, basically this 1 mana give creature hexproof, or tap a creature if it's trying to kill you, right? So, pretty good card. And lastly, now we'll be getting into ramp. So we have Talisman of Progress, Sword of the Animus. I'm going to talk about Sword of the Animus for a second, because you don't really want to use this with the TARDIS, because it's just going to fall off. So you're paying 2 mana to get a basic land every time. So basically it's like you're paying for a rampant growth every turn, which you don't really want to do. You'd rather just pay the 2 once. So I would just put it on Tegan or the First Doctor, because Tegan just can give one herself or the First Doctor, protection by giving it indestructible +1/+1. And then the Sword of Animus also gives it +1/+1. So when you're attacking with either of these guys, they're both 2/2s. They're just going to turn to 4/4s with indestructible. No one's really going to want to block that on turn 4 or 3. So yeah, I just think it's a good. I think it's a good to include in here. Soul Talisman. It's another Soul Ring. So it's been debated whether it's good or not. I think it's pretty good. Because you pay the 1 mana, you don't get it right away, but people kind of forget about it, and then it's turn 4, and you're like, oh yeah, I have a Soul Ring, by the way. Like, wait, what? Where'd that come from? How did you just, like, you got 3 extra mana this turn, and you only had like how that happened, what happened. So Soul Talisman, I think is good. Soul Ring, obviously include Omnithopter. Another, in my opinion, obviously includes a Mana Rock that also flies and can protect you in a bad situation. Good card. Mind Stone's good. Midnight Clock, always good. Always good in any artifact deck, really. Belvar Stone's good. Everflowing Chalice is good at the beginning of the game, good at the end of the game. With the multi-kicker cost, it can just be as good as you want it to be. Ethereum Sculptor, a lot of artifacts in this deck. Figured it'd be good to have an artifact cost reducer in here. So, there you go. Zoray's Signet, obvious. Arcane Signet, also obvious. But yeah, that basically concludes the main deck and what I put together. So, like I said before, it basically just plays like any other copy deck, except it has Cascade and you get to cast more copies. And if you don't, you get some cool draw spells or some cool cascading creatures or enchantments that actually cascade, so you get another chance to do it again. Yeah, and there's a solid amount of removal in this deck, and a solid amount of protection to keep all your stuff good to go, and all the usual BS and artifacts is also in here. So yeah, I do want to talk about real quick before I wrap up here is the maybe board. So I call it maybe board. This is basically just an upgrade board. So all the stuff I've marked with blue, or I guess purple, that's stuff that you're gonna want to take out and replace with the stuff in here. Now, I'm not saying you should spend $250 on 6 cards. I'm not your daddy. I'm not gonna tell you to do that, because that's kind of stupid, honestly, in my opinion. Just proxy them if you already own one of them, right? Don't buy multiple copies of these cards. Please don't do that. But yeah, so take out Elemental Blast. You're going to replace that with Fierce Guardianship. That's pretty obvious. It's a free counter spell. Purge Protection, you're going to replace with Furious Protection, because it's just a better card. Easy as that. Now, you're going to replace the Mighty Servant Luco with Rhystic Study, because this draws you the most cards, I think, out of most of these guys, besides maybe Enduring Curiosity and Danny Pink, which we're not really going to replace those because those are already good. But I would take this guy out because it just takes a lot of work to kind of get him to do the thing you want him to do. And Rhystic Study just does it, like, immediately. Like, as soon as you cast it, it's good to go. You don't have to do any other things for it. So this is what I take out, replace it with Rhystic Study. Preordain is just, it's a good card. Honestly, I was debating between Preordain and Rammus Ekor. They're both good cards, but if you're going to replace that, because what we're replacing this with, by the way, is Sensei's Divining Top. So Preordain seemed like the way to go, just because it's 1 mana, and replacing 1 mana spell with 1 mana spell makes the most sense. So that's the only reason I say replace Preordain. But if you're not feeling Rammus for whatever reason, you can replace it with Sensei's Divining Top. It's just another way to draw cards. But yeah, that's just the way I went with it. Preordain I would take out, because I just love this card so much. It just does so much for 4 mana. And then Vinwix I replace with Fairy Mastermind, just because I think it'll draw you more cards in the long run, and you don't have to wait 4 turns after you cast it for Verbose Host to take his thing. Actually, now that I think about it, you really only need 3 turns with this guy, because you start your engines, you're already at 1 speed. You can then attack with somebody if you have it, and get your get you to speed 2, and then you have 2 more turns. Yeah. On turn 4 is when you start drawing the cards, but it really only takes 3 turns. So you get there, let's say you have like another mana left over, you can just brainstorm, draw 3 cards, you're actually going to draw 6 cards and put 2 back. Like, that's pretty good for 1 mana. That's all I'm saying. But Fairy Mastermind is just like, most people in Commander are going to be drawing more than 1 card a turn, and you're going to be drawing them too. So this is just, in my opinion, better. And then that leads us to our last trade out, which would be Farewell. Like I said from the beginning, I don't like this card. Um, and I would replace it with Cycrypt in Heartbeat if Cycrypt wasn't, how much? Oh, that's right, $50. If it wasn't $50, um, instead of 6 or 7, um, I would definitely just run Cycrypt in here instead of Farewell. Farewell is just a mean card that just sets everybody back, and you can get back faster with this deck because of Cascade, but Cycrypt is just a one-sided board wipe and basically makes it so you can win too. If that makes sense. While getting rid of everything, you can also win. So anyway, that's gonna just about do it for this deck tech for tonight. For anyone who was watching, thank you guys for watching. This is kind of my first time doing this. I appreciate it. Please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Oxygen. I'll be back here again tomorrow doing another deck tech. Not the first Doctor and Tegan, but a brand new one. And I think this time I'll go ahead and build it and just kind of show you guys my process that I go through when I'm making these decks, because when it's already made, it's kind of hard for you all to see how I do things and like what goes through my mind when I'm putting stuff in decks and why I'm not putting other things in the decks. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next one.